morning, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Matty Taus. I get to be the lead pastor here at Epiphany Station, and I want to thank you for being here as we step into the second week of our teaching series, Tough Love. Now, if you happen to miss last week, which was our opener, which basically set the foundation for why we're going to do what we're doing this summer, why we're going to study the book of James, why we're going to go through some things like tough love, then you can go and find that if you missed it at epiphanystation.com under our Watch tab. Also, we've just recently got our podcast up and working if you're a person on the go and you want to be able to keep up with what we're doing. But last week, we really set the theme and the tone for what we're going to be doing for the next 11 weeks of understanding what it means to love God and love people by being challenged to do it the hard way, to do it the way that the Bible prescribes. But today we get a little inkling of what we're going to do because James famously penned these words, and he said, "When troubles of any kind come your way." Today we're going to talk about troubles. We're going to talk about hardship. We're going to talk about pain. We're going to talk about difficulty, all the really good, warm, heart-feeling stuff about church. Are we excited? Fantastic. One of the reasons, if maybe the only reason I'm excited to have a conversation about hardship and trouble is because it's so incredibly relevant and accessible to every single one of you. To every single one of us, we carry with us some continuing pain from hardship. We carry with us in this morning some trouble we're going through. Maybe we don't understand how or why it's happening or what we can do with it. James makes some pretty bold claims. There is opportunity in hardship and in trouble for it to be leveraged for good. And if we want to know how to love God and love people, then we're going to need some tough love instruction on how to do that. So what we're looking at this morning is James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. It's going to be right there. But James says this. He says, "Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing." Now, when I first read that, a long time ago, a much younger me, a much slimmer me, with a much more impressive accent than today, I read that and considered to myself, oh, there you go. Classic Christians, classic church. Let's take hardship and difficulty and let's slap a smiley face on it like everything's going to be okay. Let's look at the silver lining and pretend that there's no real problems in the world. That's how I first entertained what James was talking about. Hardship, difficulty, no, that's joy, that's good times. And I thought, that's just nonsense. And I considered, well, maybe this is why why Christians are known for wearing masks. It's maybe why they're known for being hypocrites, maybe why they're known for not really dealing with reality. Now, a much older and wiser and less slim and more Americanized version of me, knowing a little bit better, it becomes impossible to consider that that's what James is talking about. Even just from our conversation last week, there's no way James is saying, don't deal with hardship. Don't disregard it, don't diminish it. James has got this other mentality, which as we walk through it today, is how we go face to face with trouble, how we go toe to toe, how we look it and stare it down in the eye and start to understand how it can be leveraged for our own good. Because James knew hardship. James knew strife. James knew trouble. His church knew trouble. The ones he was writing to knew difficulty. Their churches were full of it, and so are ours. Because they're full of people wanting to love God and love people. They're full of broken down, full of hurting, and full of sinful people who don't know what to do with trouble. But if we want to love God, if we want to love people, even when life sucks, then we need to know how to do that. So here's a walk through, nice and slowly, through what James is saying. He begins it off by saying, brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way. Now, I don't think we need to sit on this for too long because I can't consider that any single one of you is thinking to themselves, troubles? What are these troubles he speaks of? I not knowest whereth they come from or wherever they will be, because troubles are not in my life. Every single one of you, if you're older than the age of 2, know that troubles exist, and it's not a question of if they happen in your life, it's a question of when. And then he says, consider that, every trouble, consider them an opportunity for great joy. Okay, that seems like a little bit of a stretch. We'll come back to that. He goes on to promise that if you know what you're doing, when your faith has been tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. You can develop, in layman terms, you can be less childlike and you can actually mature. And rounds it off by saying, so let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing. Now, in conversations about hardship, even embracing the mentality of dealing with them, we very rarely are thinking, oh, I'm pretty sure this is going to lead to perfection. Pretty sure that this screw-up is going to lead to my completion. More often, we're considering how to survive it, how to just knuckle under, how to just get down through it. And that is why we miss out so often on the opportunities to be better for it on the back end. Because James makes a pretty big brass boast about what it means to embrace hardship so it can be used. That opportunities can be taken. An opportunity it's a chance. It's a break in the norm. It's an opening for you to be able to step into. It's not a given. It's not saying, well, for all believers around the world, every hardship is just going to be joy. But it's a chance for us to do things differently. Now, the reason that's a bit of a leap for us is because a lot of us grow up not considering hardship in that light. We consider it as punishment. We consider hardship, difficulty, trouble as I probably did something wrong, I probably deserve it, or someone else is being a jerk. So we don't know how to look at it in a different light. We just see it as, well, I was a moron, this is what I get for it. Rather than opening up the idea and the opportunity for every single one of those problems, mistakes, and difficulties to be brought about for good. What needs to happen is we need to reframe hardship. We need to reframe what it's actually about and why God even allows it in our lives. Why it's an intentional thing, not a backup, but a plan for us to be able to grow in our relationship, a chance for us to grow up spiritually. Now, I was thinking this week as I do every week, how I'm going to actually pitch it to you that this is a really good idea. And an image came to me. A thought, a feeling, an experience. Somewhere I know that your kids are not always well behaved. Not my kids. My kids are perfect. But your kids came to mind. And the reason your kids came to mind is kids lack endurance. When it comes to hard things, they lack endurance. They completely melt down because that bit of food that they wanted to eat dropped to the floor. They absolutely lose their grip on sanity because that thing that they want right here, right now is somewhere over there, or it will be here in the future. And you've got that teenager that considers you have ruined their life because you decided to actually parent them. Now, when we look at that image of what it looks like to have immaturity and endurance and not be able to deal with things, the problem is that's quite indicative of a lot of us in our relationship with God and in our faith. As much as we might not like to admit it, we also throw tantrums. And we throw pity parties, and we throw out, why me? Why is God doing this to me? And basically what we do is, and this is the danger, this is the threat, this is why growth is needed, we can spend our entire lives continuously soiling spiritual diapers, never growing out of them, never understanding how to deal with the thing that fills the diaper. You know where I'm going with that. So why we grow them is essential, why we need to grow, but the question is, what is the promise? What is the provision? What is the desire that God has to be grown? Because it's easy enough to have a conversation about, because of that hardship, I've really grown in patience. Or because of that difficulty, now I know not to do that in the future, and I've gotten better, or I'm gooder. But James seems to be lacking interest in traits. He seems to be lacking interest in behaviors. Instead, he seems to be very interested in the one thing that needs to grow and why hardship exists in the first place. He points directly to faith. He points directly to every single opportunity you have is going to test your faith because every crappy circumstance is going to beg questions of your faith. Where's your faith at? What is your faith in? Is your faith in that everything's going to be good and everything's going to be fine and you're going to get what you need? Because apparently that's not growth. Apparently that's not maturity. Apparently how James put it, growing up means needing less and less. Being perfect, being complete is needing nothing, not getting everything that you want. Because that's probably how we would define maturity, is when you can be content, when you can be joyful with less, you've started to grow up a little bit. When you're less intimidated by the future because you don't feel like you have what you need right now. When you're less anxious, when you're less rattled by the difficulty on the horizon. That's maturity. That's growing up, however you look at it, but it's definitely growing up in faith. So how do we do that? How do we engage in hardship in such a way that is the fruit of it rather than just despondency and hopelessness? How do we build enduring faith rather than regularly ending faith? Well, the truth of the matter is, it's incredibly difficult. And I know that it's incredibly difficult because if it wasn't, we'd all be doing it already. And everyone would be doing it already, and everyone would be super mature and be able to deal with everything, but they can't because Facebook exists and we can see that they're not. But it's difficult for different sets of reasons. It's difficult for Christians because Christians get challenged on this whole idea that there's still hardship in their lives. Well, surely because now I'm a Christian, because I've got a relationship with God, everything's supposed to be fine, right? So I better make it look fine, at least if it's not fine. One of the greatest challenges for Christians in engaging in hardship well is to just admit it. Admit that it's there. Admit it to yourself. Admit it to God. Admit it to those around you. Admit that sometimes life sucks, and that could be a good thing for you to learn something from it. The other challenge is for people who are right in the midst of it, in the very middle of the hardship. Very difficult to see out of the mire and out of the bog. Because when you're mourning or when you're scornful towards your situation, it can feel like, well, this is too late. It's too late to leverage anything good from this situation. Everything's been hurt. Everything's been damaged. Another way it's challenges for those of us who are skeptical. And we look at this idea that something good could come out of it and say, that's not going to happen. That's a fairy tale. That's Christianese slapping a smiley face over the issue. And you're right. It'll never happen. It'll never happen as long as everything's working out for you and you don't want to try anything different. And the last challenge for all of us is, my goodness, do we get complacent when it comes to trouble and pain. There's just those little seasons when everything's kind of okay. The kids have stopped being sick, money's doing okay, we haven't fought for a while, and work's not bugging me that much. And we're like, hey, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the new normal. Now maybe everything's going to level out and be okay. And all of a sudden, pain. And it sweeps back in and it seems purposeless. That doesn't make any sense because we lose sight of the reality of the world we live in, that it's always coming. It's always going to happen. So with those challenges in mind, if we want to deal with hardship differently, if we want to deal with it how James is calling us to deal with it, God wants to use it to deal with it, then we need to take a step. We need to do something different. We need to feel a challenge to change our behavior in the midst of hardship, before it and after. So I'm going to ask you to do something that kind of sets the ball rolling, something to entertain in your mind. Can you pick your fight? Can you pick your fight? Can you identify what it is you're even here for, what you're fighting for, what you're struggling for? Can you ask yourself deep down, why am I even bothering? What is worth fighting for so much that I would even try to make it good when it's hard? If we don't answer that question, or we don't know, or as we regularly do, we forget what we're here for and what we're fighting for, then we usually fall into default mode. And default mode in our culture is to fight for no hardship. It is to fight for no difficulty. It is to fight for just comfort. So we exclude things that would challenge us and maybe grow us. And we cut people off and we cut things off that push our buttons rather than step into them and being willing to engage them. Because we forget what we're here for, we forget what we're fighting for. So I want you to do something for me. If you walked in today and you were given a program and a pen, which is every single one of you, or you're watching on home, I want you to grab a can of spray paint and head to your driveway. And what I want you to write is I am fighting for. And leave it blank for a minute. I am fighting for. And the reason I want you to write that is, if you don't know, life's going to suck. Life's going to suck hard because there's an impossibility for you to ever know when you're going to win, what winning looks like, how you know you'll even get there, when you'll get there, or what the genuine threats are to your fight and to your goal. It ends up being a life just lived in circles, chasing the wind. It can be fun for a while, but it ends up in purposelessness and hopelessness. And just a moment for those of us who really do want a relationship with Christ in here, if we do want to love God and love people, we don't have time, energy, and effort to waste on anything other than what really matters, what we genuinely need to be fighting for. So what is your fight? What is a worthwhile fight? I can only consider that the most worthwhile fight, the thing worth fighting most for, is what matters most, is what really genuinely deep down matters most. Romans 8 goes a little bit something like this as it describes what we're here and what it's all about. In verse 15, he says, now we, get to call him, our God, Abba Father. For his Spirit joins with our spirit to affirm that we are God's children. And since we are his children, we are his heirs. In fact, together with Christ, we are heirs of God's glory. But if we are to share his glory, we must also share his suffering. Yet what we suffer now is nothing compared to the glory he will reveal to us later. This is what God says the fight is all about. This is what James is pointing to as the reason we have any desire to go through hardship well. It's what God wants. It's what James wants. It's what I want us to know and to do, is to fight for that which is beyond compare. That which everything else pales in comparison. That which is bigger. That which is better. That which is beautiful. That which is more eternal. Because the other option is to spend your life chasing. The other option is to live fearfully. Fearful that things are going to be taken away. Fearful that the other hardship is on the horizon. Fearful that you'll never know why you came to be here in the first place. We're not supposed to be here as slaves, just living in our messed up little corner of the universe, hoping to get by. God doesn't call us slaves to anything other than being get to call family. He calls us kids who can call him dad. He's done everything that he can to affirm, confirm, declare, and guarantee that you know who you are. You would know that you belong to God and he belongs to you. And one way that he wants to help you know that is hardship. One way he's going to help form that in you is trouble. Because that is when you will know you can trust him. That is when you will know that you can depend on him. If that grows, if that matures, if that's what we desire, if that's what we want, then every trouble you face in your life falls into the lens of, I know what I'm doing this for. So every fight you engage in is not a fight just to get the fight finished. It is a fight for your eventual eternity with God in heaven. So every pitched battle that you have with your kids no longer is about getting them to behave or obey or getting better grades. Your fight with them is for their eternity. Every fight and every hurdle that you face, every difficulty now has purpose and meaning. So every health hurdle you engage in now no longer needs just to be about, well, I just need to get better. Instead, it can be, how do I do something that most never could? How do I love God and love people when I seem to be lacking what I think that I need? Every big decision that we now get to make in light of what we're here to fight for becomes easier. We get to play master tactician with everything we've got. Because if your fight is for heaven, if your fight is for heaven for you, for your family, for those around you, then even arguments about things like money become really simple. Is that going to do anything to win souls? Is that going to do anything? Is that money going to win a battle? Because at that point, decisions of where you put your coin become easy. You see, if we understand what we're fighting for, then we can truly oppose the threat that we have. The real threat of every hardship is against our faith. It's against our relationship with God. It's against the most important thing in the world. Knowing that we can focus, knowing that we can trust. Knowing that we can trust in the glory that is to come. As verse 15 or verse 18 says, if we're to share his glory, we must also share his suffering. Yet, what we suffer now is nothing compared to the glory he will reveal to us later. That is the eager hope that we live in as followers of Jesus Christ. That one day, we're going to stagger and stumble into the presence of our Lord and hear, well done, son. We're going to hear, well done, daughter. And that's why we're doing it. That's why we're here, to learn how to love him as he loves us. And with that comes not only the promise that we get to engage in that relationship, with that also comes the motivation to even start. And it's not only the motivation, it's also the impressed promise that God is for that result. That the creator of the universe is for that happening in your life. With those things, as believers, we then get to fight harder. And we get to go further, and we get to dig deeper, and we get to kick meaner against anything else that would seek to make us slaves to it. Any slave to anxiety, any slave to worry, anything that would make us a slave to anything other than the victory that God has already promised us in our eternity. If we're so focused on how making everything really good and really nice here, we're genuinely missing the entire point of our existence. In light of heaven, we can hold every opportunity, every single one, to capture it, to name it, and to fight it, in the hope that that will help us understand what it means to love God and love people. It will remind us who we belong to, that we belong to our God. And for every past hardship you've been through and every one you will ever go through, that's what we need to remember. That's what we need to be able to hold on to, that we remember whose we are, who claims ownership over us, that we can honestly say, I know what I am fighting for. Every single day I can look at that and know who I'm fighting for, know what I'm fighting for. So every difficulty now is easy to understand. I think maybe the best thing that we could do with some of our time here is to take time to remember that. It's to take time to understand whose we are and what has already been won for us and what has already been fought for us and what is now offered to us with a future of promise and hope. Because without that perspective, we will continue to be toddlers, throwing tantrums, filling diapers. Our entire spiritual life will be stagnant unless we understand why we're here. Because with that perspective of heaven, then we get to grow. Then we get to engage hardship so that it leads to completion, perfection, needing nothing. See, Jesus is the focus of that hope. Jesus is the one that was given as the focal point to help us understand this core relationship with our God. And he said, I want you to remember this. He said, I need you to know what was done for you so that when tough times come, you can rest in this, remember this. So we're going to do what he told us to do today. In a couple of minutes, we're going to take communion together. Now, I don't know what your experience or your past is with like communion, but let me explain exactly what communion is about. Communion is about Jesus telling his church, you're going to need to remember. You're going to need to remember what this is all for. And to do that, you're going to want to take something that is going to represent that. So what he said is, I want you to take bread and I want you to take juice. It's going to represent body and blood. It's going to represent what was given so that you even get to fight, so that you even have something worth fighting for. Communion at Epiphany Station is really simple. We have communion on the corners of the stage. If you want to take it with us, you can head down the center aisle. The worship team, who I'm going to invite up now, we're going to play us a couple of songs that we can hopefully sing along to and engage in our worship of God, but maybe just take some time to reflect with. Once you've taken it from the corners, you can head back down the sides, and you can take a moment. Because there really is only one requirement to communion. It's not that you're a member here. It's not that you've been here for a while or somebody knows your name. It's that you want to gear your entire life towards what is most important. And as James puts it, what's most important is a focus on your God. What's most important is a focus on your purpose. And to remember that he sent Jesus Christ so that we could even have that. That sacrifice could be made, tough love was given so we could engage in a relationship with our God. So if you're going to take communion with us today, once you've got it, take a moment. Take a moment to sit. Take a moment to ask yourselves a couple of questions. Do I want that? Do I believe that? Do I even desire that? And then when you're ready, go ahead and take it. And then spend the rest of your morning, the rest of your afternoon, the rest of your days worshiping the one that through tough love gave you even an opportunity to face hardship with hope.
Let's pray and then we'll take communion together. God, we just thank you